Welcome to the Evolutionary Women's Podcast. I'm your host, Jeannie Manchester. Join me in this sacred space for exploring the journey of spiritual awakening in the everyday and the ordinary. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our new releases. So let's go ahead and dive into today's episode.
Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahavirya Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavit Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you so much, Richard. So welcome everyone to the Evolutionary Women's Podcast. I have my dear root, I call you my Stamba teacher, Richard Freeman, and my beloved friend and teacher, Mary Taylor. So happy you could come on and have this conversation.
We're so happy to be here and to see you, Jeannie.
Yeah, you're so dear to my heart. I hope you know how those informative years of yoga at the yoga workshop here in Boulder, it really shaped my life and shaped as we enter into this conversation around happiness. We can dive in and out maybe of your bios, but I was thinking about how when I met the yoga workshop and I met you guys, it was around 1989, 90. And I was in my 20s, and I had probably around the age of 16 realized that my father was drinking, and so prior to that, I had this sort of image of my parents used to say, oh, we just always had to bathe Jeannie together because you were so joyful. We just wanted to be together bathing you. My parents would say this to me, and I had this, image of just like so much joy as a child. And then around 16, I remember feeling like, oh my God, my dad is not okay. Mm-hmm. And then that, consequently led to, feelings of my own pain, my own feelings of inadequacy, body image, all kinds of things started to come up. Now, was that the alcoholism or was it just my own feeling of separation? But that set me down the path of searching. And then when I met you guys in my 20s, I remember, and I may have said this in my last interview with you because it's very strong sense, a bodily sense of coming home to myself when I would walk into the yoga workshop. Mm-hmm. So, as we dive into this topic of, your latest book, Feeling Happy, it really started, as I've been reading it, I've been thinking, oh, well, this is why I practice yoga. Is to kind of discover, where did that little girl go that had so much joy and freedom, and part of that was youth, and then how to, as I meditate more, I feel like almost like that little bubbly self is coming back, at times. So maybe we'll back up a little bit and just say that you both started yoga a long time ago, 1968, 1971. Was there, I always think that pain or some sort of contraction in life might lead us down the path of seeking yoga, or there's a loss or something in our lives that I also feel like I found the yoga workshop because I was an athlete and I was like, yeah, I like this yoga. It moves me. But I didn't really understand the underlying potency of the pranayama and the drishti, and then starting to get quiet inside until years later I started to go, oh yeah, that's why he's doing that, So I'm curious, so long ago, what took you to both down the path of yoga so long ago? I mean, this is what, over 60 years ago or something?
Yeah. Had to say it, Jeannie, didn't you? Yeah, it was a long time ago for both of us.
Yeah. Well, I was obsessed in high school with, what can I say, with alternative culture in the sense of I became associated with Thoreau and just looking at human culture as uh, difficult. And so, and then the 60s happened. And in the 60s, there was in the background the beginning of the Vietnam War and also an extreme discontent with materialistic society as it is. And so that kind of, but, I thought that there was this wonderful alternative, which was, and which was just the actual nature of things and represented, or we experience most easily for some of us, just going outside, into nature and looking at the universe, looking at trees and bugs and plants and dogs and cats and all of that. And so in college, when I first went to college, I was already, kind of obsessed with the idea of becoming, this awakened being. And then and I met my first teacher at the Chicago Zen Temple in 1968. And of course, there were demonstrations against the war happening. And then on both sides, people demonstrating against the war also were on power trips. And so that was very enlightening. And eventually, I just, after a couple of years of college, I decided I've got to, find this, trace this out. And so I, rather than going to a Buddhist monastery in California, I went to a Krishna temple in my home village of St. Louis. And it was very nice because this was before they became interested in, converting everybody through being obnoxious. And then what happened to them, which is what happens, is they became, power trippers around the central teacher. He had a circle of people who became the powerful 12 or something, who then decided, oh, let's sell books and convert people and we'll be obnoxious on the streets. And so I decided to dump it and to go to India and to try to trace the roots of the devotional and then also the Buddhist traditions and see, what's it really like? I'm still looking.
Well, I think that's one of the qualities about your teaching that almost brings me to tears, because I'm a seeker of truth, and I think more than anything right now, it's a hard time to see the nature of truth in the world today. It's so I think that's what when I hear you speak, I'm like, well, that's why, I still want to hear what you have to say, because I feel your integrity and your honesty and your deep rooted seeking for that awakened experience, or touching that at least in life, and trying to bring that back a little bit to the surface of our lives seems so important. I think, I resisted that when I was in the 20s, and I had young kids, and it was hard to meditate at that time. It was, sometimes I say that to my younger students. I'm like, maybe it's just not the right time, right, for you to just dive in deep. It's like you're tending to children. So I have a lot of compassion around that. But the point being that I see that deep, serious seeker in you. That there's so many opportunities for yogis to kind of fly off the lid, which we've seen a lot of, and I've been involved in, and always kind of went back to your word, like of truth, of something I trusted. So thank you for that. It's important in these days that we have our teachers, our elders that we can still trust and go to and reflect with. So yeah, I just want to thank you for that. It's unique. And Mary,
it's traditional also.
Yeah.
what was that?
You said it's unique, and it's also what the best of all these traditions. There, that's when occasionally somebody comes along who's just really into it, and
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that what you're saying, Jeannie, this idea of this seed of truth is something that many, 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 many people who come to yoga have within themselves. And that, sometimes, you're mentioning younger people who have children who find it hard to meditate, and yet there's something deep inside that is, some chord in there that is nourished by these practices. And in many ways, that's why there are so many doors into the depth of the practice, as you well know, and that at the right time, the right doors, they've been open the whole time, but you go, oh, when did that door appear? And suddenly it's this feeling of a sense of sort of clearing out the central nervous system, almost clearing out the core of the body. And that we are then, we have a taste for something that we know is who we really are. And I won't go into details much, but my journey starting with yoga was similar in many ways to your own, in which I was at a time in my life where I was, at university, very stressed out, coming from a alcoholic family, having had all kinds of, sort of trying to hold the facade together of my family and of myself, etc. And that, kind of alongside the stresses of being at university were really sort of making me explode from the inside out, or implode. I don't know which would have happened. And as Richard mentioned, we were both part of the period where the war in Vietnam was huge, where the invasion of Cambodia, which was a big thing that then led to Kent State. And that was one of the first sort of things where the establishment and the, sort of anti-establishment hippies clashed, and children our age were killed. And it was just, in a way, parallel to this time that we're in now, where it's like, what is happening in the world, And so at that point, I was very, very fortunate in that I had read a few books, very beginning kind of books on yoga. And I have a dear friend who didn't say because of this, she just said, why don't you just try some yoga? And I admired her greatly. And so I tried, and it was just quote unquote, just a generic yoga class. And something about that, it wasn't any particular form that was advertised. And thinking, I've often thought back, like, what kind of yoga was she doing? I guess it was like what one might call hatha yoga. But what happened was it got me to become still. And in that stillness, that seed of truth, that seed of sort of spaciousness that I think brings so many to these practices, it, was watered. And then it took years. And finally, after many years of, different things, then yoga really became a core part of my life. And that's what has nourished both of us for a long time together and separately, I think, is, coming from really different angles. And my approach was to not go to India. My approach, like something you did, was I went to France to study cooking, because that was a classic thing that had, and in classics, you have at least the illusion of something that has ballast and truth at its core.
Yeah.
And classic
Deep aesthetics.
Deep aesthetics.
It's art.
It's art. Yeah.
The art of cooking.
Yeah. And to me, that has been a complete parallel to what yoga has brought. And what I also brought to this was knowledge from my father, who was a professor at a university. Both my parents were. And he was very involved in the administration. And he'd come home just talking about, the politics and this person jockeying for position and this person, behaving in this way and that way. And then I saw that reflected in the cooking world. And so when I've seen it in, the yoga world, it's not been a surprise. It's human nature that happens. However, in the yoga world, or in a more spiritually oriented world, there is this responsibility of those who are teaching, etc., to not do it even more than there is in the English department, because people have come with this sense of rawness and vulnerability, searching for truth. So, but it's been fascinating over the years to watch patterns and to disengage from my own, story enough to not be damaged by them again and again.
That is such an important point. I think, you talk about this in the book, and I look at that through the lens of meditation. For me, has just been, this repatterning of, when you go into those deep inner states and you learn to, you can't unlearn, right? To let go, to surrender, we have this thing we call, surrender, innocence, ease, and surrender, letting the mantra slide in. And the mantra, because of its aliveness, will go to, like a hummingbird to nectar, will go to the ananda value, which I was been studying that, Sanskrit a little bit. And the ananda, right, the long A, ananda, is connected to longing, or itcha, like the longing for bliss, for that freedom of, just being who we're meant to be, not the story that got overlaid and then imprinted in the body, but like, who are we at our essential nature? So I love that the image of the hummingbird to nectar. Of course, it has to go through a lot of layers to get to the nectar, and I think for me, it's I can see, like you were saying, Mary, like I'm sure you've seen this, Richard, as well, just the resistance to going in. Like, like the phone is here and the drink is here and the dog is barking, and it's like, this is all, consciousness. But if we want to really go in and touch that ananda value, I don't know what they call that in Buddhism, but in the tantric tradition that I study, it's pretty sublime when I'm able to just let go, and I'm learning and to unlearn, to let go, yielding to that vibration inside, trusting in that. I do find that at times I have this sort of welling up of beauty, of love, of joy, of giggling, of, it's Tim was like, oh no, here she is, that lunatic, crazy young girl, she's back. It's actually quite thrilling when I see that part of myself. I also, of course, we say it's fire and nectar, so it's also going to be a confrontation with the ways in which we have blocked that, or felt partial, or inhibited, or that I think that can also come out in pride and arrogance, as we're seeing today. But I'm curious what you think, when we talk about, like, bringing the energy. I definitely see the place, like on the stula level, the physical practice continues to be very important for me. And you'll be happy to know that I really go back to the pranayama that you taught, Richard, and the drishti. And you talk about that in here. And these are ways that we start to kind of turn our attention inward. And then, eventually maybe we sit in silence. So I'm just curious, as we talk about freedom and happiness, where you see this is in the process of waking up to our true nature.
Well, my feeling is, and not to interrupt here, Richard, because I saw you taking a breath in, but my feeling quickly is that freedom and happiness are our true nature.
It's the true nature of
things.
Yeah, of everything.
Yeah.
And
that's our true nature, the true nature of being.
Mm-hmm. So in the title of the book, I think it's the yoga of what is it? Body, breath,
heart,
heart and mind. And I was going to come back around to breath, and that middle one, the heart, is really a powerful one, because it's the heart, what we call the heart body, is really how you hold other beings, including yourself. You know, what you really, are you going to reduce them to what you think they are, or you're going to see them more deeply? And as you learn to see other beings more deeply, then you could say they're in your heart. And that's what allows you to really feel the present moment. And then you can actually feel your own body, and you can actually get yourself into your own heart, not your image of yourself, which is usually taken over all the space in there. But the actual, and we can't even define who that self is, except that it's inseparable. It's in the heart of all the other beings that belong in the heart. And
and we talk in the book about, just as a way of kind of understanding this, what you're describing so beautifully, this feeling of wholeness, where that is, where that lives in our experience. And we talk about the body and the heart and the mind and look at them separately, but knowing that they can never be separate. But looking at them separately allows us to feel and experience and, have thoughts about the differences between them and the differences in how we behave and feel and act when we are dominated by one or the other, or when there's a more homogeneous sense of them being integrated, with the idea that when you see a tiny little baby, let's say, and there's just these wiggly little things like you were, where, you were mentioning with your parents saying, we want to both be there to bathe this one. And it's all of us come into the world, with this sense of those aspects of ourselves being integrated, where we're not identifying with one or the other. And then being able to think of them in terms of language, with the body having the language of sensation, and that's how it communicates with us. And then the mind has the language of, visualization and words and symbols, and that's how it communicates.
Code. Code's the modern word for.
And then that the heart really is this intuitive aspect of ourselves that doesn't use language, that is impacted by the body and the mind when emotions wind up in the heart, and there are sensations and thoughts that become sort of stirred up, but deep beneath them in the heart there's sort of intuition. And the same, in a sense, is true, or a similar sense, with the breath, which is obviously part of the body, but not that it's this part that communicates with us day in and day out. And so the idea that we have been exploring in this work is that the cues you get from the heart, the gut, the sort of intuitive thing that draws you to yoga. And the cues you get from the disturbances or the non-disturbances of breath, those are things you can't really put into words, but that do take you into that space of rejoining. When you're saying unlearning, that's what we're unlearning, is to be fractured, body, heart, and mind. And so paying attention as we can to the breath and the heart sense of things is this way of finding that spaciousness that, of course, never lasts indefinitely, but it starts to become a touchstone. When the more you touch into it, the more frequently you can find it again in complex situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Want to say something, Richard?
Oh.
No pressure.
Something. Okay. I just said, well, the breath is something, it's been with us. Even when our minds wander, we're still at least panting. Even when we, go online and the breath is still there, and then kind of unappreciated. And but every feeling we have, every emotion, every even theory, good or bad or kind of neutral, that we make about what's going on, about ourselves or about others or about politics or the entire universe, all of them correspond to particular sensation patterns. There's a sensation pattern that is associated with, my joyous thoughts, my kind of neutral, or then my neurotic thoughts, and then my extremely emotional thoughts. And even when I get occasionally impatient or angry, those thoughts, there's sensations that are immediately accompanying them. And we generally kind of ignore what's arising in the present moment as what we call the pratyaksha, or that which is right in front of your eyes, or actually which is in front of any of your senses, but the eyes are the easy metaphor. We ignore it. And so a lot of the practice in the book is to come back to what is actually happening in terms of the entire body. And we call it sensation, but sometimes to call it anything means that because you have what does sensation look like? And you look on your phone or something. Or,
Google it.
Yeah, you Google it. Well, and then you don't recognize that actually, all of the sounds, feelings, touch, even smells and tastes that are arising are like quite astonishing. And you can actually feel them through the entire body. And so we practice staying with what we would say is the breath, but actually with the breath, you're actually feeling the sensation patterns as they're arising before you make a theory about them and go off on the story associated with that. And so that's the challenge for a lot of us, is just feel or hear what's actually arising. And sometimes you do that out in nature, and then you go, it's beautiful, just sound in the jungle. And then your mind instantly says, oh, that's a bird, and which is probably true, it's probably a bird. But then you just labeled it, and then you're in fact, oh, I love birds, and you go off on this positive story about the wonder of birds, and then you notice, oh, there I am, I'm ignoring the actual sensation itself, and then you go, oh, and you go back to it. And so, and it takes just endless practice
Mhm.
to do, but it actually transforms the way that the body holds all of its ideas and theories about you and others and about the universe. Those gradually they change, and they keep changing.
Makes a lot of sense to me when I, kind of, I do filter through my own experience. I think I was just thinking, oh, this is moment by moment practice. This is not overlaying. Like I have a great example. I've probably told you this, but I was pregnant with Emma in your studio here in Boulder, and I just had this spontaneous awareness that I was having a girl. She had blue eyes. She would be blonde. And then when I got up out of Shavasana, I said, "Oh, you just want a girl now that you have a boy." Like I like overlaid it completely. Like immediately was like, you don't know that to be true. And I think that's interesting because, with meditation now, after all these years of continuously going deep, we have this in Nilakanta, we talk about moment by moment practice and how stabilizing inside allows us to stand on what Paul calls the ledge of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So that I feel like this is kind of what you're talking about, is suspending the overlay to experience what is right here. It's so easy to want to just overlay, even like knowing you. Like I could overlay with what I know about you, but here I am in this moment with you that is new. We're here at this moment. And
It goes both ways, Jeannie. Yeah, it's so true. And it's great to be able to even think that and then maybe not do that.
And we all do it occasionally,
Yes.
And then when we do it, it's totally like natural thing to do. In fact, if you didn't do it at all, you'd probably be just dead,
Yeah, it's like the forgetting and the remembering, the longing.
It's like thinking, oh, there I thought again. I think I'm thinking, and then and it just takes this kind of feeling of like humor
Yes.
to say, oh, and then you kind of start over. And we like to say, well, you're starting from the beginning, which is you're starting from zero, which is a Buddhist term, shunyata, which is the present moment, which is the same as joy or bliss or ananda or all of that. You're starting from, wow, that's stunning.
And that's a beautiful image, that ledge of freedom, or that edge of freedom. And that's what it is it's this space that is between the chaos on the surface of things and this vastness that is everywhere, that when we meditate deeply or just happen upon the sunlight coming in a certain way and we become enthralled by that, where we open up, there's this spaciousness beneath the chaos, and that ledge of freedom is where we find stability to be able to engage, having intelligence from both sides of that ledge, where you can maintain the sense of spaciousness and stillness, but also see the confusion on the surface of things, or the joy or whatever it is that's on the surface, and not become sort of taken out of the moment. And however we get there, it doesn't really matter. The method is not the important thing. The fact that we can understand that that's a capacity, that's a natural capacity to cultivate, is amazing. So it's wonderful to see you, over these years, having known you many years, and Not that there's anything wrong as the 20-year-old Jeannie coming to class, because that brings in all this excitement and all this other stuff, but and that never to lose those parts of ourselves, but then not to become trapped by them to the point that we can't go more deeply or can't go in directions that are parallel, because there's infinite opportunity to be.
I was thinking as you were speaking that that ledge of freedom, what I've noticed is I can hold my tongue, one, right? Zip the lips, and become, as we were mentioning earlier, like to be more responsible for the words and actions that I take, because I do know that they're going to have an impact on my future. And that, that we can avoid a lot of suffering from being able to immerse deeply in meditation and then come back and then have a moment where you kind of almost weigh it out. It's like, I think years ago you said to me, skillful means, Jeannie, skillful means. I remember that. It's all over one notebook of mine. And that to me is skillful means, because it's like, well, if I act this way, it's almost in a second you're doing this. Is that going to perpetuate a good outcome? Like, is this where I want to take myself? Is this the future I really long for? We have that phrase in the Yoga Sutras, Dagda Bija Nyaya, the burnt seed cannot flourish. And I think about that a lot. Like, wow, how many situations have I been able to avoid because I'm deeply going inside of myself and kind of doing that churning inside and coming out, and then not always, but more often, be able to stand and choose more of what I want that future self to look like.
Yeah, skillful means.
Skillful means.
And that's a really nice metaphor for that is in the medical world, where, a physician, they need to make a diagnosis, and so they will often have an initial diagnosis, and then they have to do something. They have, well, maybe this will help, and then if they're really open-minded, if something doesn't help, they'll change the diagnosis and they'll try something else, without feeling that they're stupid but what occasionally happens in the medical is you get a specialist and they'll want, your problem to be exactly the problem that they specialize in. And so they will go ahead and do a surgery on you based on
That's extreme.
That's an extreme case. And they won't actually look at, they won't change their theory just on the spot, which, and we do it when we go down the street, oh, that's a nice person. And then you get closer and you see, well, it's not actually a person. We have to make these changing judgments. And we also do it with our kind of religious practices too, because you got to focus your mind with what you really sincerely believe is beautiful, like, I worship trees or something, and I go down and then you have to be able to see, oh, that's your gateway in, and you can't hold on to the gateway, that you have to let it go. And the same thing with our religious interpretations and things. We have to, become a such and such a religious person. But then after, it starts to get me focused, then I want to keep going. And so I start to focus on the word idol comes up, the idol that I placed, and there are lots of major religions around the world, and you just take a look at that as a phenomenon.
Or just,
And-
you know, just as you've been
Yeah.
describing, we do it with things like that state of bliss or openness or, you know, wonder that arose in yoga, and going back and looking for that, or feeling like when I drop into the meditation and I have that wonderful experience, and then the mind just is this troublemaker that takes over and says, okay, and becomes the surgeon who misdiagnoses that this is actually, you know, these states are things that are there. That's why I said, you know, that freedom is part of who we are, because it's already there, we just have forgotten.
Yeah.
And so it's that discernment again and again and again, and thinking about what impact will my actions have, not only on me, but as importantly on others, and not knowing for sure what they might be, but knowing that you have to be in alignment with what you feel intuitively. And this is the heart speaking, that what you feel intuitively is the truth, which comes back in that circle to learning to trust oneself, to really know that, yes, there is some way this unit that I call my body has a method for cueing me that I am finding truth. And when you can do that, that's what I believe surrender is about. Not like giving your power away, but taking away your blocks and realizing, whoa, this is truth living inside me. This is freedom living inside me. And it feels so good that, you know, it's easy to get twisted by it. But the same is true, I think, with happiness and with love and with compassion. They're these things that cue us into being more human, more real.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about more of that, more spaciousness, that I can, like, for me, it always has to be like a direct experience. I feel like I'm so kinesthetically oriented that the learning of even the inner states has been a real physical experience of the Shakti. And to me, if I'm not experiencing that, then I'm probably going to go seeking again, because it really needs to meet me, and for me to understand it as my own actual experience, rather than hearing something, or taking it hearsay, or even reading an ancient text. If it's not, now I feel like I'll read some Sanskrit, and I'll actually feel it inside the body, and I'm like, okay, I guess this is what it was meant to evoke, was a lot of energy. But I didn't at first. I didn't have that, so it's like what is being disclosed as we start to go in and we do surrender, we do let go, and that there is always more. There isn't this end state. Well, I don't know. The Shakta masters seem to have some sort of understanding of unity. And I do have to say that I have a longing to experience more of that, but I know that that's also a dangerous path to kind of dangle the carrot, and then to be sorely disappointed. But I always say to my students, like, even if we had one more drop of unity, one more drop of compassion into today, then that's good, It's,
And that's, you're describing exactly what, Richard, you often describe in my mind. And tell me, I'm telling you both what you're doing, but it is this idea of nectar, that, that it's a word, the word nectar doesn't have the overlay of some of the other words that we use to describe that state. And the yearning is fine, unless you go off on a tangent with it for 20 years, which maybe one needs to do. But the yearning at least tells you that there's something inside you that needs nourishment, that needs something that's not happening in your life or in your awareness, or it's, whatever it is. So, this idea of yearning, when you then get trapped by the storyline of yearning, which is parallel to when people, blow out their knee skiing, and then for 10 years later, 10 more years, they identify as the person with the bum knee. That's kind of the same thing as identifying with your yearning. Whereas no, it's this evolving process.
Just so for our listeners can understand, like your perspective on, how do we, we've been talking about it through meditation. We can, begin to repattern through asana. We can begin to repattern. Are there other ways that, like my students were saying today, I asked them in lieu of this interview, I said, what's taking you out of happiness today? And they, of course, went to politics. Politics, war, the shooting of firefighters. It seemed completely like out of the blue, and I don't even understand right now. Like the news is sort of what to trust, what not to trust. The surface is very chaotic, and it's very tenuous. It's like, what is going on the surface, and what is going to happen? We don't know, and that can cause a lot of fear. And so we can be stripped of our happiness in a moment's notice, right? And when there's fear and anxiety, and so I'm just curious how you might answer that question. The students are going to listen to this interview, so I said I would ask the question, and we've been answering it, so you might want to just reiterate. But
it's particularly in looking at the world today, and I'm thinking in the larger environmental and political scene, it's so sad. And it's a deeper mess than we can even imagine. And and you think, well, I just want to be happy, And so the one method is to just go and, smoke weed and get drunk or something, which common practice
doesn't work
well in the long run. Or to, to see all of those that are miserable, with compassion. And then this is what we call the Brahma Viharas, which is actually a Buddhist teaching, brilliantly woven into the Yoga Sutra, which I think is a great Buddhist text, by the way. But,
I love that.
and that is when you meet someone who's actually happy, even if, and sometimes it's just a puppy or a little kid or something, but you feel this great joy when you meet them. And then if you meet someone who's suffering, and this could also be you, or an image of you, and going through, you feel great compassion, and are in that compassion. If you can do anything, you do it. And sometimes you don't know what to do, and you just wait, but there's that sincere compassion. And then what are those last two?
So if you meet someone who's exalted, someone who's, like in the word punya, who's incredibly enlightened,
radiant.
Yeah, radiant. That we talk about it as you're filled with delight. And those three, the feeling, friendliness or happiness when you see that, and the compassion when you see suffering, and the delight when you see this enlightened being, like a very fine teacher, or someone like the Dalai Lama or something like that. You can't help feeling those things. And that sets you up to be able to deal with the last one, upekshanam, which is, as you well know, that's the opposite of the sort of brilliant being, the enlightened being, where you run into them and it's easy to say, you just feel compassion for them, know that they're suffering, etc. But it's not easy to do that, in my experience.
Right, because they could be in the process of causing great harm
to you or to others.
To you or to others as we speak,
Yeah.
or right in front of your face.
Mhm.
And you don't want to go up and like pet them and say, oh, I hope that.
And so it's the idea is not that you then accept and go along with them, but that you just kind of hold them in suspension. And within to me, in terms of happiness, this is how I can come back out of the state which I've had as a person from a very young child until even now. I see it coming up in when I see the state of some things in the world, when I look at the hundreds and hundreds of people in Gaza who've been killed recently going to get food, children, etc., etc., etc. There is this ingrained part of me that goes into depression, which was my go-to as a kid. And how do I not let that take over? And for me, it is, I have to consciously practice remembering. Like today, actually, I had a feeling of just dismay over some stuff. And then I remembered we'd spent yesterday afternoon with our neighbors who have these amazing 3 children, one who's 10 and 2 who are maybe 3.5, 4, and they're twins. And they're all so different. And we met them at the ice cream shop. And it was, it gave me this memory of, oh, that's this aspect of myself that can allow me to see more clearly in the state of running into something that is upekshanam, something that's dreadful. And then when I see that sense, feel that sense, and that's why we called it feeling happy. When you really feel the happiness, that becomes something that you can sit on a park bench and try to remember, so that you remember that is a capacity you have, and you really can feel it as part of who you are, knowing that it's not yours, it's part of the world. And then when you're faced with difficult situations, remember that feeling. And that gives you the grounding to be able to, as Richard, you were saying, to do what you can do to interface with the situation. And specifically to these times, I think it is vitally important that we find others, that we find communities of people, not to sort of huddle and ignore the world with, but those who we feel deep with.
We feel connected.
We feel connected, so that we can really let those feelings of joy and compassion and deep delight live in our body, just like you're saying, Jeannie, where you have to feel it. And then remember, even in the worst of situations, those feelings are still there. And that's, in writing this book, one of the books we were reading was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, in the, Holocaust, finding that space within himself, really, or Nelson Mandela, or some of these other political figures who have somehow, the Dalai Lama himself, who've somehow found these feelings in light of being in situations that are dreadful. And the more of us, the community aspect is that the more of us who can do that together, and then go out into the world to the ice cream shop and spread a little joy, that's the counterbalance to this very, very, very confused and tangled time that we are in.
One wonderful thing about this time in history is you can do this online. like with, um, because we talk to people all over the world in different communities, in
Even China, mainland China.
in China and Thailand, in
Ukraine, Russia.
Ukraine and Israel and Iran, in you name it. And there are people who are just like, they kind of get it. They're learning this way of, they call it upectionum, which is often mistranslated as kind of ignoring. You ignore these crazy people, but it means to see them in a higher way, or to really see them deeply, to see their backgrounds, to see their context, to see what they're coming from. And in that way, there's the possibility of acting skillfully to help them, even if it, might be eliminating them as a way of helping on certain occasions.
Hasn't happened yet.
You can help them move on if necessary, but you can also help them maybe like become, more awakened or skillful themselves, because they're suffering too. And so that higher seeing, the upectionum, is,
and finding common
Yes.
ground. I'm thinking of, we moved to North Carolina, and when we were getting ready to go to the airport at this one point, and we had an Uber driver come up to our house, and he was picking us up, and it was right after the election. And he got out of the car, and I was out there with our bags. And we looked at each other, and we knew we had not voted for the same person. And there was this moment where I could have really like been obnoxious and resisted him. And instead, I had that urge to do that. And then I thought, this is this nice guy who's, trying to make it in the world just like we all are.
as an Uber driver.
Yeah. And so we, in the 20-minute drive to the airport, I really worked at finding common ground with him, talking to him, initiating a conversation, and developing, and it comes back to the beginning of what we were talking about, developing with him a sense that he could trust me. And then we got out, and and I turned to Richard and I said, if I had 2 weeks with him, maybe we could start talking about politics. And then it was like, I don't want 2 weeks, but to me it was this example of finding common ground, because there's always common ground, and then going from there, and then calling oneself on the moments where we are not truthful, where we are avoiding or putting on our shells of defense or identity, and then eventually making it safe enough for other people to do the same. And it's a long, drawn out process, and many people think, oh, and it's possibly true, there isn't time for that. But in fact, there are decisive actions we can take politically, environmentally, etc., and we do those anyway. And then this feeling of great kindness that we can keep pouring out, however little bits and pieces we can do, to the person who's suffering at the drugstore cash register or whatever, just keep giving it out. And it, I think really truly that that eventually that's how these problems get solved. But it's not like you just go out and act like a bliss bunny. It's that you keep
unless
integrity.
that's of benefit.
Yes.
Well, I love the example of the Uber driver, because I have a student, and we are very, very politically opposed, and we discovered that during COVID times, and she still comes to class, and we had a moment of friction, and then it was like we realized we really loved each other. I really adore her, and I respect her, and I respect her religion and her way, and her way into it's really Christ consciousness for her. And it's been really beautiful for me because it's been one of those places of friction where I was like, okay, how do you want to be, Jeannie? And also as a yoga teacher, I'm like, I have a responsibility to hold a bigger container.
Exactly.
So I just heard that in that story. And then I also was thinking about this, I kind of go through the lens of meditation again, of just like laying down these new pathways inside, that we don't have to keep identifying with. It looks like it has to look like this or that, or it's like the problem of our wars is avidya. Tim, my husband, doesn't like the way that's translated. He's like, I don't like that they call it ignorance, and I said, well, it's really, just think of it as separation. Like we've separated from each other, we separated from consciousness,
We've separated from ourselves.
We think this is my land. I mean, I think about the Bhagavad Gita, and this entanglement of these families that were fighting over land. And then, I've heard the story of how they were gambling Shri, the earth, and you can't gamble her. You can't gamble consciousness. She's going to win. So I was just thinking about how slowly but surely I feel like some of those new pathways are being laid down inside of me. And mostly I feel that more as a more sattvic state, like I'm a little more spacious, until I get entangled with family, and then I can feel my heartbeat and But I do think that compassion and kindness and generosity comes from a spaciousness inside of us that is just a really good feeling to. My husband's very good at it, just like naturally sort of wanting to take care of others, to find homes for people in this town. And it's just, I think that until the interstate changes, it's hard to be aware that, like Mary, you were talking about, like you could feel this energy take you over, and then you were with the children, and that brought this lightness of being back to you, and you're remembering that feeling of, yes, I know that feeling inside of me. I think
and that goes right, Jeannie, to that point where you're saying, this discernment of what is going to be the effect of if I go deeply into depression, and what's going to be the effect if I remember that other joyful feeling and then reframe my, my disgust or whatever it is, dismay or whatever has brought me this negative feeling, reframe it from that point rather than from what might be called brokenheartedness, and when I have thought deeply about it, I don't think the heart really ever breaks. I don't, we say it feels like it breaks, but I think it's that our illusions are the things that are breaking, and then the heart, the spaciousness is still there, and there's this moment of clinging and fear, like abhinivesha, or the fear of death, of our ideals breaking apart. And then we enter that world of not knowing what's going to happen next. And that's great if we can be there with it. And that, to me, is why this sense of keeping connections, and we're so grateful to you, having known you for all these years, to connect again and again, because then you feel this sense of continuity with others who are, same or different perspectives on the world, who are really truly also feeling the need to find truth. And when I don't have the energy to do it, I can turn to someone else to help. And and vice versa, when they aren't feeling it, they can turn to me.
Yeah, we need each other. Especially now. Yeah, I was thinking about how the other thing that I feel from my practice is just like a welling up of devotion, of love for you both, for the years that you held so much space for all of us, and continue to hold this for a bigger, wider global community. And so I just want to thank you for that. I don't know that that's always easy to do, to hold the container, and that, I just have a lot of just devotion. It really just wells up. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I want to be devoted to Marian retreat. I'm going to make that happen. It's more
a commitment.
it's more just sure, there are memories there, but it's more like in this moment, I just feel that you're important voices for our world today, and I want to preserve voices that matter. This is part of the podcast. You're our first male guest, Richard. We will have other males, but it's been devoted to women in particular, just because I feel like maybe women have a part in maybe bringing us more towards what we call the Sat Yuga times. How much we will see in our lives, I don't know. I love the way Paul Muller Ortega describes it. He describes the Sat Yuga as the slice of light on the horizon in the east in the morning when you wake up, and it's dark, but you see the light and the birds are chirping. So we're still in the dark, obviously. We're still in a big period of vidya, of separation. We see this, and I think it's going to continue, maybe intensify, who knows. And so how do we live? This is my inquiry for myself, is how do I live as a Sat Yuga teacher, leader, person, wife, mother, in these times, friend, because, and I think we've been talking about this entire time, is to take responsibility for our actions, and to promote more compassion and peace through stabilization inside, right? So that we can actually decide to make that happen. As I go off this afternoon to get my greens at the garden, how will I interact? So, we've been talking for a while. I could talk for another hour, but I know it's usually, these are shorter interviews, but I knew that just catching you guys in the States, I just thought I'm going to have this a little bit longer. Is there anything that you want to end with, a practice or anything that would be helpful for these times? I do hear that, I don't want to project, but I do hear sort of that the July could be a bit intense. I want to get this interview out as soon as possible so people can be served by the wisdom that you guys have been so graciously offering.
I mean, it's super simple, but there's so many. In our book, we have a bunch of different exercises that we think are helpful, but I think one of the ones that helps me the most is the Viloma practice on the exhale, because that's this idea of, as Richard said in the beginning, bringing, awareness to sensation patterns, and the breath being associated, the exhaling breath being associated with getting grounded.
Yes.
And clear. And so in the moments as we break the breath up, going down, we get grounded, but there's a moment of spaciousness in between where we have the opportunity always to let go and start anew and be fresh, to let a little more breath out.
So this would assume you've inhaled, if you're going to exhale. And the inhaling is like, but it's also associated with the time and space and ego, and for the better or for worse, and all of that. And then the fact that it crumbles, it pop, it's like popping bubbles. And that's the residue, leftovers, and it all returns like water all the way down to the present moment, which is considered the source. This whole thing about 13 billion years ago, that's all relative, but and so when you inhale and you feel the heart open and it's like this radiance, you want to keep that feeling as you exhale, which takes
a little practice.
It takes a little bit of practice to keep the all of the luminous qualities of the full inhale with each step of the exhale until you're really, really empty, but you still have that posture is one, and then the internal alignment of having fully inhaled. And it's just, I was going to say it's breathtaking, but that would be
It's
redundant.
breathtaking.
Yeah.
Do one
When you
round.
finally then inhale, after and if you practice, it can take you a minute or two to do that, or even short, So viloma just means to divide the noodle into segments.
Maybe we do three
Ex-
divisions.
Okay.
Just you lead one.
Okay.
I remember, Richard, you always saying to, just soften the palate and to have that little hint of a smile on the face. That is stuck with me all these years. It's really potent. It's like,
Yeah, because as you think, even if you're not talking, your tongue is forming tension patterns that are linguistic, even if it's not, a spoken language. And the palate is almost receiving it. And so what we want is the tongue to become, just to go, ah. Sounds a lot like ah. And the palate, we say, is empty. And you're just listening. Or just observing, just pure observation. And to keep that quality and so that's why we say it's kind of like you listen to the breath in each segment. And so the exercise would be first to sit as straight as, your current body allows, and then
eyes can be open or closed.
And if you can, you listen to the breath. That's the nice thing about the Ujjayi breathing is you are using just the sound of your breath like a mantra, and you inhale and you fill front and back, side to side, bottom to top. You fill it all the way up into the frontal sinuses, way like smelling something. And then you smile. And then you do the first inhale.
Exhale.
Exhale. And stop. And then you exhale again.
Keep the heart open.
And stop. And every stop you do, you feel the pelvic floor wake up. It goes, bing, I'm online. And then you exhale again. Ah. And stop. And then if you need, you can do an extra exhale. Ha, 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 ha. And you feel, but you're keeping the heart like the sunshine, radiant. And you can pause as long as comfortable. It doesn't take. And then finally, if you touch your lower belly, way down under, just above the pubic bone, you just touch it. And then that initiates this delightful inhale. You just feel how cool the breath is. And you fill yourself up again.
And then you just rest in that residue, a few rounds of natural, easy breathing. And you notice the sense of connecting to earth at the end of the exhale, but the heart stays light and bright, and the palate released and the tongue soft. And as the breath turns around, you notice also that you remain connected to earth, and the breath fills. Still, the tongue is soft. And then you just let it be.
Then it just shines.
That's so good. I just love it so much. It feels so connected to that nectar channel. So thank you so much. I
Thank you,
hope
Jeannie.
that we get to do this again sometime, and I will get this out. I just want to let people know that you have a Wednesday evening talk. This will probably come out after tomorrow night, but you have them, is it once a month or?
It's the first Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
Although in August, we may have a pre-recorded thing because we're in Germany.
We'll be in Germany then.
Wow.
But mostly they're live and they're free, and we'd love anyone to join and they're recorded, so you can always find it.
Yeah, there's some really great topics I've been noticing. Karma tomorrow night, karma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I could be there. And then your website now is
Freeman Taylor Yoga.
Freeman Taylor Yoga. I love it. You've really combined, which is so beautiful. You're such a beautiful teacher, Mary. And
Thank you.
yeah, you've had a good teacher.
Many teachers.
Many
You've been my teacher too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this time and your generosity and your wisdom. And I hope this just helps people through these times.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you
you
for your
so
works.
Yeah.